Okay, this portion of your final project is really fun and challenging. So, you have the coding side that you've been working on all semester. You've got the analytical report, which is essentially putting into words your thought processes, the little bits of comments you've put into code, you're just putting them into words. But now you're doing the slide deck piece. And that's what we've been kind of talking about all semester. That's what my lectures have been all semester, but now you actually get to do it. So I know I said in the last video I'm really excited to see your projects, but this is what I'm super excited to see because this is really I get to see what you know and I get to see a little bit more of your creativity. So this is essentially you are taking your very technical project and you are creating a slide deck for I say business audience, but essentially a non-technical audience. So um, you don't have to record a presentation. You can if you want, but I'm only going to grade the slide deck portion. So that's kind of a challenge. You want all of your information to be in a slide deck. Um, you are going to cover the basic information of your analysis without getting too technical, and you're going to focus on really the purpose of your project, why it's important, and then really dive into the details on the conclusions and insights that people can draw from your project. So, again, I'm going to go over the rubric. I did just figure out I put in too many points on this. It's 50, but your assignment's only 45. So, I'm going to fix that. I think I just need to make the assignment 50 points. But I'm going to match the rubric to the assignment, whichever one is correct. Um, as in the assignment, you do have to have an introduction and a conclusion. So, a really good executive report or business report, whichever one you want to call it, has an executive summary, introduction, something to draw the audience in. So, I want you to have some sort of, beyond the title slide, some sort of good introduction slide that draws the audience in to say, this project is really important. This is, whether it's a silly data set that you picked or it's actually really meaningful in a social capacity, it's scientific, whatever it may be. You want to draw the audience in and make them understand that your work is important in some sort of way, or you want them to be interested in the results of your work. So, some sort of persuasive argument to say, you need to listen to what I'm about to say. So that's the good category, is you get them interested and you get them kind of hooked in. The good category, it's slightly less persuasive. You still introduce your project, but it's not really getting them hooked. Fair, you briefly introduce it, but there's not really anything else there. And then poor, there's just no introduction, because the assignment does say you have to have an introduction. Same thing with the conclusion. A really great both slide deck and presentation in general. They have the introduction, and then the conclusion draws the audience back to think about that introduction. Essentially, the phrasing goes, you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, you're going to tell them, and then you're going to tell them what you just told them. So you have to repeat to the audience over and over kind of the point of what you're trying to make, or else you're going to lose your audience. So that conclusion is going to reiterate why your presentation, your analysis was so important. You're going to focus on the key takeaways, those insights that you learned, what's next. Make sure it aligns with what you told them at the beginning. So make sure you didn't completely flip the script and change what you're going to talk about. So that's the good, or the excellent. Good, you didn't quite align it. You maybe switched a little bit. Fair, there's not a lot of good takeaways. So you need to make sure that your project has some sort of takeaways, whether this is what we need to know from this data, or this is what I learned doesn't work. Remember, 80% of data science projects fail. So it's okay if you find out your models are just not very good. That's kind of part of life. But there needs to be some sort of conclusion that the audience can walk away with. And then, of course, you get 0 points. All of the poor category is that you just didn't do it or you didn't follow directions. The audience is a big part of this because the analytical report is directed towards me. I'm your audience for this. Your audience for your slide deck, though, is a non-technical audience. So just like that mock email, I don't want technical jargon. While you can talk about the models you built, you can mention things like accuracy, you also need to define those, and you need to define them in a very clear way without throwing a lot of information at your audience. So stick to the points that are critical to what the audience needs to know to understand, again, the goal of your project and the key takeaways of your analysis. So make sure things are clear and understandable without rushing through. And I put an example here. If you're talking a lot about predictions and accuracy rates, but you don't define what that means, that can lose your audience very quickly. So if you have to talk about accuracy rates to make your point, define accuracy rates and use a clear example, use pictures. And again, and like all of these, excellent is the gold standard. This is what I write first. Good is just not quite there, but you're almost. And then fair is you're not quite getting it, but you earn some points there. You're making some effort. You at least semi thought about the audience, but maybe you had a really good introduction conclusion and then you went super technical. So think about your audience all the way through. And my trick for this is I pretend like I am speaking to my mother sometimes. And if my mom could understand my presentation, it was a really good one because my mom she still doesn't know what I do for a job. So if my mom can understand your presentation, you absolutely nailed it. That's like excellent plus. But think about just anyone that you work with that's not super technical. If they can understand your slide deck, that's great. That's excellent. And then finally, the content quality, because your slide deck should pretty much match your code and your analytical report. So making sure that you're not just describing a totally different project, you're not skimming on too many details. Your audience is still very intelligent, they're just not super technical. So make sure you're still describing what's really important. You're getting your point across. You're making sure that the slide deck is cohesive. You're not putting too much tiny little text on your slides. And one big point here is that you are demonstrating to me that you have a clear grasp of the material. One of the things that I always think about is that when you are describing to someone that's not in the same field as you, that's a really clear indicator that you know your stuff, because it's pretty easy to describe something if you're kind of already speaking the same language. Me speaking to one of my colleagues, that we're already on the same page, we have the same kind of background. It's easy for us to know what the other person is saying. But me speaking again to my mom about data analytics, she has no idea what I'm talking about. So if I'm able to get my point across, that demonstrates that I kind of know my stuff. I'm pretty good at it at this point. So if you're able to describe to a business audience your project and your work in a clear manner, that shows me that you know your stuff. You did really well this semester. So very clear grasp of both the material and your project. So it's one thing to know the material, it's another thing to really understand your project. So both the data, where it came from, and what you did with it. Same thing in good. So you need it both for these. Moderate grasp in the fair category. And then you'll end up in poor if you just have no idea what's going on, obviously. So yeah, that's the slide deck. This is, again, a pretty fun one because you can get more creative with it. Use analogies, use different ways of speaking. So you get a little bit more nerdy and fun in the analytical report. In this one, you're going to code switch a little bit and talk in a different manner. You're going to create a slide deck. You're going to stick to only the pieces that they need to know. And that's kind of hard for us sometimes because we want to get into the details. We want to describe all the tiny little decisions we made along the way, but you're going to have to stick to the big picture. What do they need to know? What's most important? And what are the key takeaways? And with that, that is your final project. So hopefully that's helpful. Good luck, and let me know if you need any help. Bye.